The U.S. will deploy additional warships and fighter jets to the Middle East to help defend Israel from possible attacks by Iran and its proxies, the Pentagon said. Tensions remain high in the region over the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Iran and a key commander of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Missile defense forces were placed on a state of increased readiness to deploy, the Pentagon said, adding that its commitment to defend Israel was ironclad. Iran's leader Ayatollah Khamenei has vowed harsh punishment against Israel for the assassination of Haniyeh. The Hamas leader was killed in Tehran on Wednesday. Iran and its proxy in Gaza blamed the attack on Israel, which has not commented. Haniyeh, 62, was widely considered Hamas's overall leader and played a key role in negotiations aimed at reaching a ceasefire in the Gaza war. His death came just hours after Israel claimed it killed Fuad Shukr, the top military commander of Iran's proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has revoked a pre-trial agreement reached with men accused of plotting the 11th of September 2001 attacks. In a memo on Friday, Mr. Austin also said he was revoking the authority of the officer overseeing the military court who signed the agreement on Wednesday. The original deal, which would reportedly have spared the alleged attackers the death penalty, was criticized by some families of victims. The 9/11 attacks in New York, Virginia and Pennsylvania were the deadliest assault on U.S. soil since the 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, where 2,400 people were killed. They sparked the War on Terror and the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. In his memo, Mr. Austin named 5 defendants including the alleged ringleader of the plot, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, all of whom are held in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The original deal named 3 men. I have determined that, in light of the significance of the decision to enter into pre-trial agreements with the accused, responsibility for such a decision should rest with me as the superior authority, Mr. Austin wrote to Brig Gen Susan Esclier. I hereby withdraw your authority. Effective immediately, in the exercise of my authority, I hereby withdraw from the 3 pre-trial agreements. The White House said on Wednesday that it had played no role in the plea deal. The 5 men named in the memo were Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, often referred to as KSM, Walid Muhammad Salah Mubarak bin Adish, Mustafa Ahmed Adam al-Hassawi, and 2 others not mentioned in the original plea, Ramzi bin al-Shib and Ali Abdulaziz Ali. The men have been in custody for decades without trial. All have alleged they were tortured. KSM was subjected to simulated drowning, so-called waterboarding, 183 times before it was banned by the U.S. government. All have already faced more than a decade of pre-trial hearings, complicated by the allegations and evidence of torture against them. Several family members of victims had criticized the terms of the deal struck on Wednesday as too lenient. Brett Eagleson, the president of 9/11 Justice, which represents survivors and relatives of victims, had told the BBC earlier this week that the families were deeply troubled by these plea deals. Speaking on Saturday, Terry Strada, who lost her husband Tom and chairs the 9/11 Families United group, told the BBC she was very pleased to see the Pentagon revoke the plea deal and put the death penalty back on the table. If the men are found guilty after a trial, Mrs. Strada said she would want to see the death penalty, not because I am ghoulish or a horrible person, it's because it fits the crime. They've murdered nearly 3,000 Americans on American soil, lives were just permanently altered on that day, she added. A lawyer at Guantanamo representing Mohammed told the New York Times that he was shocked by the sudden U-turn. If the Secretary of Defense issued such an order, I am respectfully and profoundly disappointed that after all of these years the government still has not learned the lessons of this case, said lawyer Gary Sowards. And the mischief that results from disregarding due process and fair play. The men have been accused of a litany of charges, including attacking civilians, murder in violation of the laws of war, hijacking and terrorism. In September, the Biden administration reportedly rejected the terms of a plea deal with 5 men held at the U.S. Navy base in Cuba, including Mohammed. The men had reportedly sought a guarantee from the president that they would not be kept in solitary confinement and would have access to trauma treatment. KSM is alleged to have brought the idea of hijacking and flying planes into buildings to al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. He was captured in Pakistan in 2003 along with Hossawi, a Saudi who was an alleged fundraiser. Ali, a computer scientist and nephew of KSM, is accused of providing technical support to the 9/11 operation. Bin al-Shib, a Yemeni, allegedly coordinated the attacks and had planned to be a hijacker but could not secure a U.S. visa. Bin Adish, also a Yemeni, is accused of bombing the USS Cole in Yemen in 2000, which killed 17 sailors, and involvement in the 11th of September attacks. Several Republicans applauded the defense secretary for revoking the deal. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said the Biden-Harris administration is correct to reverse course, which he said followed Republicans launching investigations into this terrible plea deal. Now deliver long-awaited justice for 9/11 families, he said. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said the decision exercised good command judgment. The previous plea deal would have sent absolutely the wrong signal to terrorists throughout the world, he added. Earlier on Friday, Republican Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee Mike Rogers demanded answers from Mr. Austin on how the deal was struck. This deal signals willingness to negotiate with terrorists who deliberately harm Americans, he wrote in a letter to the defense secretary. 3 of the men accused of plotting the 11th of September 2001 attacks on the U.S. have entered into a pre-trial agreement, the Department of Defense says. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Walid Mohammed Saleh Mubarak bin Adish and Mustafa Ahmed Adam al-Hossawi have been held at the U.S. Navy base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for years without going to trial. In exchange for the prosecution agreeing not to seek the death penalty, the trio have agreed to plead guilty to all of the charged offenses, including the murder of the 2,976 people listed in the charge sheet. The attacks in New York, Virginia and Pennsylvania sparked the War on Terror, and the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Bret Eagleson, the president of 9/11 Justice, an organization that represents 9/11 survivors and relatives of victims, said in a statement provided to the BBC that the families are deeply troubled by these plea deals. He said the process lacked transparency and urged the authorities to pursue more information on the role of Saudi Arabia in the attacks. Terry Strada, who lost her husband Tom, told the BBC's Today program, "It was a gut punch to hear that there was a plea deal today that was giving the detainees in Guantanamo Bay what they want." Ms. Strada, the national chair of the campaign group 9/11 Families United, added, "This is a victory for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other 2, it's a victory for them," she said. 3 men accused of plotting 9/11 reach plea deal. Pentagon. 2 days ago. Max Matza, BBC News. Share. Getty Images. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed when he was captured in 2003. 3 of the men accused of plotting the 11th of September 2001 attacks on the U.S. have entered into a pre-trial agreement, the Department of Defense says. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Walid Mohammed Saleh Mubarak bin Adish and Mustafa Ahmed Adam al-Hossawi have been held at the U.S. Navy base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for years without going to trial. In exchange for the prosecution agreeing not to seek the death penalty, the trio have agreed to plead guilty to all of the charged offenses, including the murder of the 2,976 people listed in the charge sheet. The attacks in New York, Virginia and Pennsylvania sparked the War on Terror and the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Brett Eagleson, the president of 9/11 Justice, an organization that represents 9/11 survivors and relatives of victims, said in a statement provided to the BBC that the families are deeply troubled by these plea deals. He said the process lacked transparency and urged the authorities to pursue more information on the role of Saudi Arabia in the attacks. Terry Strada, who lost her husband Tom, told the BBC's Today program, "It was a gut punch to hear that there was a plea deal today that was giving the detainees in Guantanamo Bay what they want." Ms. Strada, the national chair of the campaign group 9/11 Families United, added, "This is a victory for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other two, it's a victory for them," she said. Getty Images. The 9/11 attacks were the deadliest assault on U.S. soil since the 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, where 2,400 people were killed. The plea deal was first announced in a letter sent by prosecutors to the families of victims, according to the BBC's U.S. partner CBS News. It said the plea before a military court could come as early as next week. The trio would be sentenced later by a panel of military officers. In the letter, prosecutors said families may have the opportunity to deliver victim impact statements during the sentencing hearing, which is expected to take place in the summer of 2025. Prosecutors also acknowledged the deal was likely to elicit intense emotion and mixed reactions among the thousands of family members who lost someone. The decision to enter into a pre-trial agreement after 12 years of pre-trial litigation was not reached lightly. However, it is our collective, reasoned, and good faith judgment that this resolution is the best path to finality and justice in this case, prosecutors wrote in the letter. What happened on 9/11? How 9/11 mastermind slipped through FBI's fingers. In its announcement, the U.S. Defense Department said, "The specific terms and conditions of the pretrial agreements are not available to the public at this time." The men have been accused of a litany of charges, including attacking civilians, murder in violation of the laws of war, hijacking and terrorism. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is widely considered the architect of the attack, in which hijackers seized passenger planes and crashed them into the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon outside of Washington. A fourth plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back. Mohammed, a U.S.-educated engineer, was captured along with Hossawi in Pakistan in March 2003. Prosecutors argued that he brought his idea of hijacking and flying planes into U.S. buildings to al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, and later helped recruit and train some of the hijackers. He was subjected to a number of enhanced interrogation techniques, including waterboarding, simulated drowning, at least 183 times before the practice was banned by the U.S. government. In a courtroom just feet away from 9/11 suspects, the trial has been delayed for so long partly because of fears that the so-called brutal interrogation techniques, which critics say amounted to torture, could have undermined the evidence against the detainees. "This is the least bad deal in the real world that would ever happen," national security analyst Peter Bergen told CNN. In September, the Biden administration reportedly rejected the terms of a plea deal with 5 men held at the U.S. Navy base in Cuba, including Mohammed. The men had reportedly sought a guarantee from the president that they would not be kept in solitary confinement and would have access to trauma treatment. The White House National Security Council said that the president's office was told on Wednesday of the new deal and had played no role in negotiations. 15 of the 19 plane hijackers were Saudi nationals, and families are bringing a lawsuit against the kingdom, which denies any involvement. Republicans attacked the Biden administration for striking a deal with the accused. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell condemned the move as a revolting abdication of the government's responsibility to defend America and provide justice.